practice, practice.
If you want to learn how to balance the handstand,
Stay tuned for our 3 tips on how to balance.
the first area we're going to look at is actually how to balance the handstand using our hands, wrists, elbows, shoulders, spine, and also hips.
The second tip we're going to look at is what is overbalance and what is underbalance, and learning how to correct each one.
And the last one is the feeling of the balance. Once you understand where to move and how to rebalance or counterbalance the handstand, it's all about the feeling of it as well. So let's get into it. When we're trying to understand how to balance in the handstand, I like the analogy of us learning to stand in this position. So if we have a look at the position of the handstand and relate it to this standing posture and how we learned how to stand, it can be really helpful for your mind to start to understand it and for you to understand which parts of the body need to move and counterbalance for you to remain in the handstand. Let's take a look at the hands. The hands are planted on the floor. We need to make sure that they're very active. We're not just putting our hands on the floor and hoping for the best. We want to stay nice and active through the fingers. So always gripping into the ground if you need it. If you're falling forward, you can use this action of squeezing into the ground and also this action of pressing. So this is super helpful if you're falling forward or you're overbalancing. You want to put the brakes on, we call it. So you press into the ground or grip the ground like this to try to put the brakes on, just like you would if you were standing leaning forward. You try to put the brakes on to prevent yourself from falling forward. Now let's take a look at the elbows, moving up the chain all the way down to the hips. The next one is the elbows. And like I said before, I liken this to bending at the knees to help counterbalance and stay balanced in that standing posture. We know that the handstand is a straight arm position, and if we keep the arms locked out, the handstand is going to look nicer, aesthetically pleasing, but know that it's a constant rebalance in the handstand. We never just stay static and just hold and everything's switched on and we're just dead straight. There's always this constant rebalance happening, and a lot of that can be through the elbows. So what you do is you try to lock it out, and if you're holding balance, this is fine, but if you start to underbalance, what you can do is slightly bend at the elbows and then press back into the position. This is probably an exercise or a movement that I use a lot when I'm balancing my handstand. I tend to fall into underbalance a lot, and I bend my elbows a little bit and I can push myself back into that. So a way to practice that, you can just put your hands on the ground, slight bend, and push back into here. You can also do this drill on the wall. Next, we're going to have a look at the shoulders as we move up the chain. The shoulders play a vital role in elevation of the handstand, so staying in that really strong, straight position, but also they can move forward and back as well, moving into flexion, opening them up, and then also coming forward so the shoulders close off a little bit. So you've got this position, you can press and open the shoulders as well. You want to make sure that you've got enough mobility in the shoulders. If your shoulders are really tight, you'll be kind of stuck in this position here, and you won't have that freedom to move through that straight line position and also open them up as well. So do your best to open your shoulders up, make sure you've got plenty of range of motion, and use your shoulders to counterbalance. Next, we're going to take a look at the spine. So the spine plays obviously a vital role in the positioning of the handstand, where we want to try to keep everything nice and stacked for a straight line handstand. We want to think about the cue of pulling the rib cage in like this. So we're keeping a nice flat back, pulling the rib cage in. What tends to happen if you've got tight shoulders or if you're not used to the position of the handstand, we're going to flare the ribs, and this can really dramatically affect up and down the chain of the handstand, so it might really affect your balance. So what you want to try to do is pull the rib cage in, get that nice straight line all the way through the body. But remember, you might not be able to access this position. If you do have tight shoulders, tight lats, you might need to open those positions up so you can access more freedom of movement through the spine, so it can help you out with the balance. Now let's take a look at the hips. The hips play a vital role in the positioning of the handstand. You might have heard this before, posterior pelvic tilt for your straight line handstand. That gives you a nice flat back, glutes are switched on, so it's going to give you this nice straight line. But also we want to make sure that we can move through anterior and posterior pelvic tilt and be able to move the hips, because the hips can play a role in balancing the handstand. We also use split positions for balancing as well, so you've got this ability to move forward and back, and this can be a good way to counterbalance the handstand and to rebalance so you can stay up there.
Tip number 2 is understanding overbalance and underbalance and knowing how to correct each one with different drills. So overbalance is when you kick up to your handstand and your weight goes over your fingertips, and underbalance is when you kick up to your handstand and maybe you don't go quite far enough, or maybe you just keep falling out to your feet. Some really great drills for practicing your overbalance would be any drills on the wall where we've got our back to the wall. So we're thinking about the split handstand and also heel pull variations. With your heel pull variations, you can start nice and easy by just taking one foot off the wall at a time and then bringing it back to the wall, and then trying a little switch. So you've got one foot off and then you try to switch with the other foot, and then you could try to bring 2 feet off the wall together and then bring them back to the wall again. Now for underbalance in the handstand. A lot of people, when they first start out in handstands, they often underbalance, and this is because they don't kick hard enough to actually be in the balanced position for the handstand. So the first tip would be to try to actually kick hard enough so that you can experience where the handstand is. With the underbalance, when we're trying to correct it, some really great drills would be chest to wall drills. So these are all of our toe pull variations. And we can start nice and easy by having 2 feet on the wall, send your weight forward, shoulders forward, take 1 foot off the wall and then bring it back to the wall. And then we can try a little switch. So pull 1 foot away from the wall and then switch with the other foot. So we're getting a tiny little bit of air time. The next one would be to try to pull 1 foot off the wall and bring the other foot off to meet it. And then if you start to advance a little bit more, you can try to bring 2 feet off the wall together. And just as Rod mentioned earlier, when we're working with our underbalance, there's a couple of little things we can do to help bring us back into line. The first is pushing the heel of the hand back into the ground to send momentum forward. And then the second one is a little bend of the elbows and then popping back up into that straight arm position. Those 2 things are going to help to bring you back into line for your handstand.
The last thing we want to talk about is the feeling of the handstand. So we've already given you a bunch of tools that you can use to rebalance and stay in the position, but we're basically just feeding your mind. So your mind might understand some of these different things. Your body needs to understand it as well. And that's only going to come through practice. So use all the drills that you know, using the wall, kicking up, playing with it, starting to understand how your body can hold the balance of the handstand.
Something that really helped for me when I was learning my handstand was that I got addicted to handstands. I loved handstands so much that I literally practiced them every single day. I would boil the jug, and while the jug was boiling, I would practice my handstands. It's just everywhere I was, at the park, at the beach, anywhere, any opportunity to practice, I was practicing, and I really feel like it helps to get addicted.
Practice, practice, practice. We hope that video was helpful. We've been teaching handstands now for over a decade, and we understand that it's very complex and very individual as well. So if you've got any questions, please leave us a comment below and we'll get back to you because we're here to help.
And if you feel like you need support with programming, please check out our TMC Move Pro app. We've got heaps of programs on there for handstands that are suitable for beginners all the way through to advanced.